If you're ready to get some spooky or cute things sewn up for Halloween, this video has 8 tutorials, all complete in a row. Take a look in the description below. You can see what you can choose and exactly what timestamp to go to it. Happy Halloween and happy sewing. In this video tutorial, I'm going to show you how quick and easy it is to make a reversible trick-or-treat bag in no time at all. You're going to need an exterior fabric and an interior fabric, or this could be your exterior, this could be your interior, because again, they're reversible. 16 inches square each. Then I like long handles, and I make them out of 2 pieces of 5-inch by 20-inch long fabric. Then you need your basics, rotary cutter, scissors. I'm going to use this little ruler to cut corners out to make boxed corners, another optional part of the bag that I will explain later. Clips or pins, a pencil, thread, rotary cutter, sewing machine, things like that. So let's get started. If you're using directional fabric like I am, you need to make sure that when you put your pieces right sides together, that the direction is the same. So the top is up here. You don't want to have it this way, where one half will be right side up and one half will be upside down. So just pay attention to that if you're using directional fabric. I'm going to assume that this is usually going to be the lining, even though this will be reversible. I'm going to put these together, right sides together. And then in the bottom corners, I'm going to draw a box that is 2 inches in each corner. This is one way to make boxed corners, which basically makes a bag that has a base to it and stands up on its own. You want this to be even faster. You can just make a flat bag. It will hold plenty of candy for your little trick-or-treaters or whatever you want. But I just like to give the bags a little bit more shape. So I have drawn these, and then I'm just going to cut these corners out. Then I'm just going to clip the sides. And since I'm treating this one as the lining, I'm also going to put 2 pins along the bottom so that I remember to leave this space open for turning. So we're going to sew down this side, just this section, then this section, and then up this side. I'm going to set that aside, grab my other fabric, and repeat the steps. Cutting out a 2-inch square is going to create a 4-inch flat bottom on your bag. So the bottom of the bag basically becomes twice the size of the square. So if you want your bottom to be smaller, you would just cut out a smaller square. And if you want it to be larger, you would just cut out a larger square. For the exterior fabric, you're going to sew down the one side, across the bottom and up the side, leaving these corners open because we're going to be using them to make the bottom. And as I said in the beginning, I'm showing you how to make a quick and easy trick-or-treat bag. You can take the concepts and the sizes, like the fabric sizes that I showed you, and make this as complicated as you want. You could do a quilted bag. You could add a border. So instead of cutting 2 16-inch squares from one fabric, you could maybe do a 3-inch border on the top. So you would basically create that 16-inch square from 2 different fabrics. You could add trim, you could applique, you could embroider names, so many fun things you could do. I would love to hear what your plans are. Are you going to keep it quick and easy, or are you going to do something a little bit more elaborate? Let me know in the comments. Now that we've sewed the side and the bottoms, we are going to press these seams open. They don't have to be pressed open perfectly, but it just makes it a little bit nicer of a finish. Now on the lining fabric, or the second fabric, if you're keeping this reversible, you are going to want to press this seam and press the unsewn part so that it is even. So I'm actually going to do this one a little bit different. Let's try it this way. I'm just going to press the one side. Now I'm going to turn it over. I'm going to do the same thing on this side. Now what pressing this does is it is going to have this open edge ready to sew closed. Now, if you really want this to be a perfect bottom and nobody's going to know which side you created as the inside or the outside, when you go to sew this together, you can just do it by hand. Since it is the bottom of a trick-or-treat bag, if you don't care, you can just sew really close to it with your sewing machine. So this is where we cut the corner out of our original squares. So you're just going to grab that where that corner is cut on each side of the bag. So pinch one, pinch another one, and just pull it straight out. The lines will go straight across. You're going to match the seams. Put a little clip in there. And if you want to put 2 more clips just to make sure that this stays lined up, that is not going to be a bad idea. And then we are just going to sew straight across 1/4 inch from that raw edge to make that boxed corner. And you're just going to repeat the process on the other side, and then also do the same thing for the lining. Now, there's many ways to make handles. You could fold it in half, sew it, flip it, press it, but I want this handle to be a little bit more sturdy. I'm going to fold this in half. Now, if this was a printed fabric, you would be doing this wrong sides together. So the printed side would be out. Then I'm going to open it up. I'm going to fold and press each long edge into that first seam. So what this is going to do is it's going to take a 5-inch wide piece of fabric and turn it into a 1.5 inch wide handle that has 4 layers of fabric. So it's going to be nice and sturdy for the kids to grab and open and close and head out trick-or-treating. We do both of those, and then we are going to press this one more time. And if you want to, you can just throw a couple clips or pins on here to make sure it stays lined up correctly when we sew. So what we're going to do is you're going to sew down both long sides at about 1/8 of an inch from the edge, just to sew that closed. If you want to, you could even do a decorative stitch or something fun down the center if you just want to add a little more something to the bag. Moving right along, we have the outside fabric sewn together with the boxed corners. We have the lining with the opening for turning and our 2 straps. Now it is time to assemble. So what I like to do is take my lining fabric and turn that right side out. Just push out those corners. And then you want your seams on either side and match these raw edges along the top, and then line it up along a ruler or your rotary cutter mat. Now we are going to baste the handles onto the lining before assembling the entire bag. So I am just going to measure over 4 inches from each side. 1, 2, 3, 4. Put a mark. Then I'm just going to fold it down so that I'm placing a mark at the same point on both sides of the bag. Now I'm going to take a handle. I'm going to make sure it's not twisted. Don't pin it so it's twisted. Make sure it's going to stay nice and flat. I'm going to take the raw edges. We didn't have to sew those. Center that on that mark and just clip or pin that in place. I'm going to turn the bag over and repeat on this side. And now we are just going to baste the handles on, sewing 1/8 of an inch from the edge so that the basting stitch won't show when we put the bag together. Our handles are basted on. And now it is time to put the 2 bags together. We're going to keep this piece inside out the way it is so that we can put the lining and the handles inside, and our fabrics will be right sides together. So you're going to put that in there, and then you're going to find one of the seams from the lining and match that up with the seam of the exterior fabric and clip. Then flip it around, find the other seam, and clip that as well. Then I just simply stand it up and shake it. And you're just going to clip these raw edges together. They should be exactly the same size. Just make sure that your handles are laying flat. I would also love to know who you're going to make these for. Are you making them for your own kids, for your grandkids? This could be a great project to sew and sell for all those people that aren't sewers and crafty like you are, that want something a little bit more special and handmade. So let me know in the comments who you're making it for. You don't have to worry about how it's organized in here. You just need to make sure that this upper edge is lined up and clipped together. Because we left an opening in the lining for turning, we're going to sew all the way around the top 1/4 inch from that edge. Now we need to turn the bag right side out. So you're going to find the opening that you left in the bottom of one of your fabrics or the lining fabric, and then you're just going to pull the whole thing through there. Now you'll notice, because we pressed this the way we did, You're going to be able to make that invisible if you were to hand stitch that closed. Or if you don't mind an itty bitty bump, you can go like this and you can just stitch by machine really close. But we're not ready to do that yet. First, I'm going to lay the bag out. I'm going to have the handles going the same way. And I'm going to press where these two came together. That is going to make it easier for us to top stitch. So I'm going to now take the lining and I'm going to push it inside the bag. And now what I need to do is I need to press this top edge so that this seam between the two colors is right on the edge. We don't want the inside showing on the outside. We don't want the outside showing on the inside because, again, we want this to be well done and reversible so that nobody is going to know which side was which when you were making it. I'm going to stitch about 1/8 of an inch from the edge so that I do catch that handle again and give it a little bit more support. Because we used a 1/4 inch seam, it doesn't hang down very far, so you want to make sure you are getting that in your top stitching. I also don't want an ugly knot on either side of the bag where I start and stop. So I am going to start and stop right around a side seam. But I am also going to pull up my bobbin thread, which means I'm going to put the foot down. I'm going to lower the needle, pull the needle back up while holding this thread. Now I can grab the bobbin thread. And when I get started, I can put both of these. I'm holding both of the threads back here. Do a few stitches forward, a few stitches back. And that's going to knot that nicely. It's not going to have a big old bird's nest on the other side. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to make these cute Halloween ghosts using soft fabric from the Dollar Tree in the automotive aisle. So really excited about it. It is an easy project. You can get a free pattern with the templates that you can download. Look in the link below the video to find that. But before we get started, I want to show you this printer. Call me old school. I've always had a large printer in my home for work and other things. But more and more, I'm hearing about how people don't have printers. Oh, I can't print that. I don't have a printer. They're doing everything digitally. So if that is you, but you occasionally want to print a pattern or something else, you could look at a thermal printer. Look at how small this thing is. It's amazing. So the people from Munvin, I hope I'm saying that right, gave me this to try. So I'm going to show you how it works. And I did use it with this project. And you can also find a link to find this below the video. So make sure you take a look at that. And there will be a promotional code too, because they want you to get a deal if you learn about it from this video. So let's take a look at this. It is a thermal printer, which basically means it's like a cash register receipt, right? A lot of people think they don't know what thermal printers are, but you actually do. So it isn't super long-term paper. It lasts for 3 years and you don't want to put a ton of heat on it. So let me show you. There's just these little buttons on the side. It took me a minute to figure out how to load this, so I'm going to do that. You want to open it up, and it does come with a roll of paper in here. This moves to hold or release that. You want to take that out, unless you're going to use the rolled paper. I am not at this point. I'm going to close it, and I'm going to turn it on. It comes with a cord, a USB-C, so you charge it. So you don't have to have it plugged in when you're using it. I think this is a fantastic option if you like to travel, go to retreats. You can have all of your patterns and everything on your phone or maybe in a Google Drive or something. Download them to the phone, use the app, and print right from there. So cool. So I am going to be using this letter size paper, and it is folded. The plain side is the front. The side with the black is the back. On one side of this, there is metal with the little cutting jiggy things, kind of like on saran wrap. So that is going to come out that side. So if you're using the roll, then you can use that to tear. With this letter paper, it's already perforated, so that's not as important. But I'm just going to feed the paper into this side. and it catches it, and you'll see it's getting it all lined up and ready for me. And then when that turns green, it is good to go. Now I'm going to show you how this app works, but this is an app called Smart Fox, and you can pick all different kinds of things, and it's a free app. You can, print a document, do a tattoo print, scan and print, do labels, invoices, websites. So we're going to do document. It's connecting to my printer. And then you can see there's all different kinds of documents that you can connect to. I'm going to be doing the free sample, and you can get this off my website. Look for the link below. And then I'm going to scroll down, and you can print all of the directions, or you can just print the template. So I'm going to click the print button. And then here you're going to choose the direction, and this is landscape. Paper type, you decide if you're doing roll or folded. Then I don't want to print every page. So here I'm going to put 4 to 5. And then I'm just going to double check before I hit print. So landscape, print normal. It prints really, really well. And I'm just going to hit print. It's going to confirm, hit print now. And now we shall just watch the magic happen. It's nice and quiet. And I was actually really impressed and amazed at how nice and dark that is. And that's it. How easy is that? And then to take the paper out, you're just going to open it back up, and then you can just slide that back out, close that, push the button to turn it back off. I'm glad that they let me try that and share that with you. Now let us move on to our tutorial so we can use these templates and make some stuffed ghosts for Halloween. Now let's look at our supplies. This looks like a big old mess and like you need a lot, but it's really not as complicated as it appears. This is the little ghost that we are going to make. I'm going to use orange for the banners this time instead of the pink. Then you need fabric scissors, and I like to use pinking shears, but you do not need them. If you don't have pinking shears, I would recommend a small pair of scissors like this for clipping the curves and here when you're going, before you turn that right side out. Then you're going to need felt or scraps of felt, and you can get a free PDF that shows you the sizes of everything that you need so that you can make this cute little banner and the eyes. Optional embroidery thread if you want to sew on a mouth. This one I just did with a pen to see how it looked. We're going to do the next one a little bit differently. Then I'm going to use this rickrack for the banner, just like I did with this one. I think it's super cute. Stuffing, whatever your preference is. I am using the Polyfill Crafter's Choice from Fairfield World. Then I wanted to make him nice and soft. So I went to the Dollar Tree and I got this microfiber cloth. It is 16 by 24. And I'm going to be able to get my whole ghost out of this, possibly 2. We shall see when we get to cutting. You don't have to use this. You could use a towel if you want him to have a different texture. You can obviously use white cotton, whatever you want. But I just thought this would be a little bit fun. I will say I did sew with it once. It is very fuzzy. You're definitely going to want to clean your machine when you're done with this project and your workspace, but I think it is worth it. Then some straight pins. Needle and thread for sewing it closed. I'm going to show you a trick with a stapler that I came up with that I'm pretty pleased with myself about, and I'm sure you're just dying to know about that, so let's get into it. So I'm going to take my template. We'll start with this one, which has the designs for the banner and the letters, and then also the eyes. This is a mouth if you just wanted to trace that on, and you could embroider it. You can just draw one on. I'm actually going to cut a third black oval and have a big ghost mouth. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut this template apart because I know these are going to be orange, and I am using paper scissors, not my fabric scissors. I know they cut the paper when we're cutting out the pieces, but if I'm only cutting paper, I use my paper scissors. You can either use a big piece of felt or you can grab some scraps. I had some scraps of black, so I'm going to use that. And this is where my stapler comes in. Because these are pretty hard to pin, like you wouldn't be able to pin them and cut without cutting through a pin, so that's not going to work. Using glue, which I sometimes do, like put glue on the back and put it onto fabric so it stays temporarily while you cut. it doesn't work on the felt. I did try that. So I decided to try stapling it. So I'm just going to put 2 staples, although you do have to cut this into individual pieces if you're going to use my little staple method. Have you ever tried this before? I don't know. I couldn't sleep the other night and I just started thinking, how can I get these to stay better? Because you can also cut them without it, but the paper is going to slide around a little bit more. But this stapling works great. And I love this thermal paper because it is nice and thin. It's easier to cut. It's also super portable. Okay, so I have stapled those on. Now I am going to cut them out. I do use smaller scissors when I'm cutting out these center parts. And what I do is I fold that a little bit and then I will clip to get a hole in the center. In case you haven't cut out many things like this before, this is how I do it. And then I'm going to just hold it together, but it is staying pretty nicely with these staples. We have our O cut out, but it has staples. So now I'm just going to take tweezers and I'm going to bend the back of the staple back up. And once you have that bent back up, you can just pull it right out. Just make sure you don't poke it into your finger when you're bending that second side. And then if you need to do any maintenance, see there's a little funny little piece there. You can just trim up your letters. Make sure that shape is nice. And do that for all 3 letters. Didn't do the best job on that B, but it'll just look a little bit spooky. Now I'm going to cut these banners out of the orange, and I'm going to line this line up with this edge, this line up with this edge. That's just 2 cuts I'm not going to have to make. I am going to pin those. This could be a fun project to do with kids or scouts, because with felt especially, you can decide if you want to sew things together or you can also use glue. So this banner could be completely glued together. You could even have the kids hand stitch the ghost instead of sewing it. So it could be an easy project like that. But I'm going to show you how to put this together with your sewing machine. Okay, so now we have our banners. You're going to want to put your letters down a little bit. Going to want to spell correctly. And you're going to put it down a little bit because if you're going to use rickrack, I'm going to sew mine across the top. If you want to sew it behind, you can center the letters more. But I think it's really fun when it goes over the top like that. So just think about that before you sew these on. I'm just going to sew a single stitch right around these letters. I have black thread in both the top and the bottom. And I'm using a pretty small stitch. I'm going to pull up this bobbin thread so that I don't get a big knot on the back. If you've never seen this, you basically put your needle down while holding on to the top thread and then lift it, and that pulls your bobbin thread up. Then you're going to grab both, put them under your foot, and hold them back. Then you can go forward a few stitches and then backwards to knot your thread. And you're not going to have that bird's nest that you sometimes get on the bottom if you don't do that. Now, my machine also has function where I can push a button, and when I stop, my foot is going to stay up. I know, I'm so spoiled, but I love that about it. I'm using a Janome M7 Continental. So then whenever I want to pivot, it's just going to go up for me. And because I'm sewing black on black felt, you really will not see this thread at all. So I'm not being super careful about making sure it's always in the middle. This is really just to get it to stay on. Now you could be fancier. You could do a white stitch and make the letters, or you could use a metallic, but we're just going for quick, cute, and done here today. Sometimes I can't grab that really well without poking myself, so I always keep tweezers by my machine to grab that bobbin thread. So we have our BOO done. We can stick this on the banner later, or we can do it now. I'm going to just do it now. I'm going to fold this in half, find the center, and the center is going to go on the center of that center O. Lots of centers. And you can put this banner together with anything. You could put ribbon, you could use string, cording. For smaller projects like this, I like to just look around and see what I have and decide which of those things I want to use instead of running out and buying something new, but totally up to you and depends on what you have in your stash. Now we need to make the eyes. I'm going to do a third one. And if you want to do the mouth, just reuse one of the eyes, the eye templates after you cut it out the first time. Now we are going to work on the ghost. It's a great piece of fabric for $1.25. I'm going to grab my pattern and I'm going to put it pretty close to this edge, but you don't want it on the stitched edge. And I'm going to pin him down. Pinned on, we are just going to cut that out. And keep your fabric flat on your table as much as possible. It is going to give you a much more accurate cut. Because if you start picking it up and cutting, your fabric is more likely to move. It is a little bit harder on some of these curves, but the closer to flat on your table that you can stay, the more accurate your pieces are going to be. Okay, we'll take the pins off, and then let's see if we can do two of these guys from that one cloth. You can. What a deal. The next thing you need to do is you need to decide what direction you want your ghost facing. So in my first one, I have him looking off to the right, but you could just as easily put the eyes on the other side. So I'm going to do that for this one so they can be like they're ghosts in love looking at each other. So I'm just going to flip that over and then just look at the photo on the free PDF to get a feel for where you want to put your eyes. You don't want them too low where they're going to get in the way of your banner. And then also remember, you're going to be sewing with a 1/2 inch seam. So don't put them too close to the top because we don't want them to get sewn into that seam. And now it is time to sew down our ghost eyes and mouth. Now, when I did the last one, I didn't put anything underneath this. And I will tell you, it didn't move really well because it's so fluffy and fuzzy on the bottom that the feed dogs had a hard time really moving it around. So this time, I'm just going to take a little scrap of white cotton fabric and put that behind it because you're not going to see it once we get that stuffed. But it's going to make it move better in my machine. And it's also going to hopefully make there be a little bit less fluff going into the bottom of my machine, although you'll get plenty when we sew this ghost back together. So we're just going to do the same thing. I'm just going to do a very short, actually I'm going to do like 1.2, very short stitch all the way around these eyes to tack them down. If you want to, like if you like to embroider, you could embroider the eyes on, you could embroider around the edges, but again, I'm just going for quick and done here. You could also use buttons, Google eyes, all kinds of things. This could also be really cool. You could embroider, if you have an embroidery machine or you want to embroider by hand, you could embroider a child's name or initial on the back of the ghost. So it's like a stuffed animal toy for them versus a decoration. So many ways you can dress this up. Now our ghost eyes are embroidered on, and these little are just white fuzzies from the towel that come off. I like it with the mouth. Now, as I said, it moved a little bit. You can leave this on, or you can just trim off the excess white. So it's pretty much just behind where you sewed those eyes on. Totally up to you. All right, let's go back to the workstation and we will get him pinned together. Our next step is to pin the ghost together. You'll notice I made him a little flat on the bottom so that he will stand up kind of nicely. He doesn't stand up on his own. Maybe if you put something really heavy in the bottom, but he leans against things really nicely. So you're just going to match these edges and pin all the way around. And then I always like to put 2 pins where I need to stop because sometimes you just get on a roll and you're sewing along and you're just so happy. And then you end up sewing the whole thing together and then you got to get your seam ripper out and do all that. So I like to put 2 pins so I know where to stop. We are going to sew around this with a short stitch because we do have quite a few curves and we're going to want to turn it right side out to get these hands so that they can hold that banner. We don't want to lose the back of the ghost's tail. I don't know, is that what you call that? What do you call that? So use a shorter stitch, maybe a 1.5, 1.4. Before we turn our ghost right side out, we need to clip these curves and definitely these little points by the arms so that it's going to turn and give us a nice shape. And I like to do that with a combination of small scissors and pinking shears. But if you don't have pinking shears, you're totally fine. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the small scissors and I'm going to snip into the inside corners and kind of cut out some of that bulk. Don't clip your stitches. So I'm going to do that on both sides here. Most of the rest with pinking shears. So the reason I love pinking shears for curves is, again, it's fast. So you're just going to use the pinking shears and stay on the outside of the stitching. Don't cut your stitching, but you're just going to cut some of this extra bulk out. I use a 1/2 inch seam allowance on this guy because I know, especially with this fluffy fabric, it doesn't always stay a 1/2 inch. So you just want to get some of this extra bulk out. When you turn it, you're not going to have all of the fabric that's past the stitching pulling and not giving you a nice curve. I don't trim where I left it open because I want to have enough fabric that I can turn under and hand stitch closed once we stuff it. All right, so try and get most of the fuzz off of your cutting mat or your workspace. Now we're just going to turn it right side out. Now, if you do decide to make this for a child, make sure you don't have small parts that could come off. All the safety things, just remember that. I'm just going to push these hands out with my fingers for now, kind of get that shape out as best as I can. Then I'm going to use this little turning tool. It's not a super point on there. If you don't have one, chopsticks work great for this, but I'm just going to gently push and it will help get the points out better than with my fingers. But you want to do it slowly and gently so that you don't push through your stitching. I mean, if you do push through your stitching, you'll live. You can just hand stitch it closed, but it's just better not to. You can also use it to run along this head curve, get that curve pushed out a little bit better. Now comes the stuffing. If you've never stuffed anything like this before, you want to start with small pieces, kind of roll it up, and you want to put it in the tiny spots. You're going to make sure these hands are a nice shape and thickness that you like before you start really going to town on the body. Okay, so the small sections are done. Now I'm going to do the head. So you just want to stuff him so he's as fat or skinny as you want. Kind of keep pushing to get this curve the way you like it. And you want to make it pretty stuffed on the bottom so you don't end up with a big air pocket when you stitch that together. But you'll see now we left this bottom section a little bit longer so that we can fold that in. And you can use the pins, or I'm going to clip this to hold that so that it's folded the way I want it to be as I hand stitch that closed. And then once you stitch that closed, you can just decide exactly how you want this to be hanging. You can have it hang down and curve a little bit more. You can have that come behind. I just do a little hand stitch with black thread on either side of this rickrack, and I let this kind of float around. Look how cute he turned out. They're such a cute little pair, ready to decorate for Halloween. Of course, you can make the faces your own, play with the colors. You could do smaller banners and put someone's name. You could embroider a name or an initial on the back. You could use heat transfer vinyl and put somebody's name on the back if you're making these as little trick-or-treat gifts. So many ways to use these. I would love to know in the comments what you think, who you're going to make them for, and if you're going to personalize them in any way. Now, one thing to know about this paper is there's no ink involved. It's done by using heat onto the paper. And because of that, there's some things that you need to remember if you're going to be printing and storing things. Number one, it's not going to last forever. This, as it says on here, it's going to last for about 3 years, assuming you follow these conditions. So assuming your keeping it inside in a temperature less than 25 degrees Celsius or 77 degrees Fahrenheit. Avoid direct sunlight, fluorescent, and similar UV light sources. So as long as you put it in the packaging, or if it's a roll, keep it in your machine, it's going to store pretty well as long as it's not too hot. Now, the paper itself, if it gets too hot, it will yellow over time. It will turn black if it gets really, really hot. So let's just test that and see what happens like if we iron on it. I'm not sure why we need to iron on it, but because I have all these details, I'm just super curious. I'm told it's going to turn yellow at about 118 degrees Fahrenheit or 48 degrees Celsius. So put it in the sun in Phoenix in the summer, this thing's going to turn yellow. Let's see. I just turned this on, so it's not totally heat. Oh, it's hot. Look at that. So this must be over 158 degrees. Okay, that's just kind of fun, actually. No ironing your thermal paper unless you just want it to turn completely black. Look, Mom, science. All right, so that's what happens if you hit it with an iron. You can make your own block paper.
Ghosts are taking over the internet, have you noticed? And today I want to share this no-sew cute little fabric scrap ghost made with a piece of fabric, some Google eyes or felt eyes, and liquid starch. It is so easy to do. I did a few tests, and now I'm going to show you some different things to consider as you are making these. And if anyone is allergic to latex in your house, you are in luck because I can't touch balloons, so I will not be using balloons to make the curve shape on the head. But I came up with a few other solutions that obviously work. Now let's talk about forms. I cannot touch balloons, so I had to get really creative. So if you want to go balloon free, I found that these glass ornaments placed inside a small mason jar worked great for a 12 to 14 inch piece of fabric. So I just had the mason jar and the ball for the ghost that has the bottom that was touching. Then for the one that I wanted to look like he was floating, I just set that mason jar right on top of an upside down bowl. So just get creative and play with the height and how to just get things so that it's going to hang at the bottom the way that you want it to. I had to get more creative for the big one. And so what I did was I ran to the Dollar Tree and I found this terrarium planter. It's plastic, it's curved, and I was like, uh-oh, it has a hook. How am I going to do this? But luckily, you can just unscrew that and take it off. And then find a glass that you can put that on. So here's what I did. I took a cookie sheet and I put foil on top just to protect my workspace and so that I could move it. Then I took a glass bowl and I just poured some of this Stay Flow liquid starch. Now you'll see different opinions on whether you dilute it or not. I'm going full strength. I want these things nice and stiff and starchy. Now I have a 12-inch square of white fabric. I'm just going to dip it into that starch, get it nice and wet, and then you're just going to wring it out. Okay, put the starch aside. Now I'm going to put my form down, and then you're just going to put this centered over your ball, and then you're just going to let it drape down, and then just organize it however you want. So this one would kind of look like a ghost just kind of hanging out. If you want him to look like he's going into the wind or moving a little bit faster, you would just move your fabric, give it a little bit of shape, and that's it. We're just going to let that dry. So you just walk away from that. I often do these in the evening, and then by the morning, they're ready to go, and then we can put the eyes on them. Now let's make some faces. Eyes in a mouth, whatever you want. Now these ghosts are made out of my October Ghost fabric from Riley Blake Designs. It also comes with purple or a gray background. So you can use a printed Halloween fabric, maybe or some stripes or whatever, kind of make it fun. Or you can go more traditional and just use white. It just really depends what look you're going for, what scraps you're working with, and if you're doing it with other people, what they want. So maybe you give them some options. Then I got some googly eyes, also at the Dollar Tree, which I thought kind of fun, gives a different look. I put felt eyes in a mouth on the other side just to show you the difference. So that's a little more traditional. It's a little more fun. So I basically just took a scrap of black felt, figure out about how big you want it. So let's make some bigger eyes. And I'm just winging this. I just folded it in half and then just cut an oval. 2 pieces. If you're not thrilled with the shape, just trim that down. This is definitely, again, one of those projects you don't want to overthink. You just want to have fun with it. So you could do eyes and a mouth. You could just do the eyes. So much fun. And then you can either use a hot glue gun to put that on, or you could use an Elmer's glue. So when I put these on, I put a little bit of glue on the back of the felt. I just put my hand in here and then just pressed, because it's hard to get it to stick well if you don't have anything behind there. So now that your ghosts have eyes, you can decide if they're just going to hang out on a bookshelf or if you want to hang them. Are you ready to have your ghosts take flight? If you don't want them on a counter and you want them to fly around your house, just use some clear fishing line. I like to keep just a spool on hand for projects like this. And then I tied a button to the one end of the fishing line. You want to use white if you're doing a white ghost. I can put anything in that colored one because it's not going to show through. Then you're just going to pull more line than you think you're going to need for length. Then I'm just going to thread the fishing line through a needle. And now I'm just going to turn my ghost over and I'm going to poke that pin straight through the top of his cute little head. If you want to make sure it's secure, you could do just a tiny, tiny little stitch to make sure that it doesn't slip when you're moving it around. So see, when I let go, obviously gravity took that little button. So I'm just going to put an itty bitty stitch there that no one's going to see. That is nice and secure, and he is ready to fly around. And now one thing you really need to remember is you cannot hang these outside, because if they get wet, the starch is going to get wet and then they will no longer have their ghost shape and you'll be starting over and you'll just look like you have a weird piece of fabric hanging outside. So definitely keep these indoor or at least under cover, if not inside. I'm not sure how humidity would affect them, but if you try it and find out, let me know. Let's make a fabric pumpkin. It is so easy. So the first thing you're going to do is get my template. You can download the templates for free, or I do have a full pattern with written directions and lots of pictures in my Etsy shop. It comes with 2 sizes. We're going to do the smaller. And because this is directional fabric, it's really, really important to make sure the top of your fabric is lined up with the bigger part, because this is a part you're going to stuff. If you were to cut it this way, all your ghosts are going to be upside down and you're not going to be as happy with your pumpkin. Cut a few strips slightly wider than the template so that I can pile this, because we need to make 8 of these. Now this is 3 inches wide by 8 inches high. And for this one, I am going to make it all with the same fabric. But one thing I love about this pattern, because you're sewing it together, is you can make it look super scrappy. The other ones I've done, I've used 2 different ones, so they alternate. You could also, if you want it to be really scrappy looking, you could make it with 8 different fabric scraps. So each section of your pumpkin would have a different pattern. Okay, and I am going to cut these all at once. I'm going to pin through, and I know this is a lot to cut at once, but this is a stuffed project. So if it doesn't get cut absolutely perfectly, it's okay. So what kind of fabrics do you think you'll use? Will you use 8 of the same, 2 different fabrics and 4 pieces of each? Or will you go wild and make it super scrappy with 8 different fabrics? Let me know in the comments what you're thinking. Now we're going to take our 8 pieces that is going to create our pumpkin, and we're going to sew them together, right sides together. Now there's 2 ways to do this. You can sew the first 2 and then just keep adding 1 until you get all 8 together and then do the final one. But I like to do it in pairs of 2 and then put them together, because that way I don't have to pin it when I'm doing them flat. But if you want to pin it, by all means, please do. And it doesn't matter if you start from the top edge or this edge, but what does matter is to backstitch at both ends. You don't want this to pop open after it is sewn together. So let's get this done. If you do them in sets of 2, you can also daisy chain them so that you don't have to totally take it out of your sewing machine with each one. If you're using more than 1 color fabric, make sure you are paying attention to which 2 you're putting together. So when I did 2 different fabrics, I would do 2 sets of each matching and then put them together in the order that I wanted when I sewed all 8 together. Now we are going to have 4 sets of 2. So we're going to cut those apart. And because I'm using 1 fabric, it's super easy. It doesn't matter what goes with what. So we're going to open that. And once they are sewn like this, I do pin or clip them together just to make sure they stay lined up. So I'm going to take these 2 sets. I'm just going to line up this one edge. And the most important one is this bottom one. You want to line up these 2 seams and that edge. All right, so we're going to repeat that and we're going to get all these sections put together. Just double check that the bottom is nice and secure. So you don't even have to turn it all the way. Just get it so that that inside, and you can see that's nicely stitched together. It's not really pulling. If you feel like it's a little loose and open, just have a thread, you can come back and just sew across the bottom with a 1/4 inch stitch, just to reinforce that bottom if you want to. But if you did double back at each time you hit the bottom and you didn't go over the other ones, you should be good to go. Now we're going to turn our pumpkin shape right side out. So you'll notice it looks kind of oblong, but once we stuff it, it's going to be a great pumpkin shape. So I'm going to take some polyfill, or you can use any kind of fluffy stuffing that you prefer. And I'm just going to take little pieces at a time, starting in the bottom and then just kind of pushing it out. You want to put it in and make sure that you don't get big air bubbles, because then it's not going to have a great shape for you. So you just keep shoving the stuffing in. All right, so we're getting to a pretty good spot. You want it to be firm but still smushable. So then you just want to start going around and making sure it's filled in nicely in all these different spots. Now we have a big hole in the middle, so we need to add a little bit more. Just kind of pushing and moving it to a shape that you like. Now you don't want to overstuff it because we still need to pull all of this in tight to the center. Now we're going to gather the top to close that up. So what I've done is I've grabbed some thread from the sewing machine and just doubled it up, put a knot, and left a tail 5 or 6 inches long. So I'm going to start with a needle under the fabric about a 1/2 inch from the raw edge. I'm going to pull that, and then I'm going to do 2 little loops just to secure that, because if that knot isn't quite big enough, when you start pulling, it's going to pop and it's going to get messed up. Ask me how I know. This little pumpkin, I've done a bunch of these. This one is just giving me grief. Okay, so this is my new method. So we're going to do that, and then we're going to do some pretty big stitches. If you do them too small, it'll be really hard to pull together. So you want them quite large. I'm going to go all the way around. Now, because this has been giving me such grief in the pulling and tying off the end, and I decided it would be easier if I had another person here to help me hold it, but I don't, I have come up with a plan. So now we're back to the end thread. Leave your needle on. I'm going to take some big quilting safety pins, and I'm going to squeeze this in, and I am going to do a couple big safety pin chunks to help keep this fabric already in, so it's not having to pull quite as much with the thread, and it'll be easier to pull and tie it off. Make sure your safety pins are lower than where your stitching is. You don't want them on or above the stitching. See, so now it's not as tight, and don't worry about how it looks, because once we take those pins out, it'll be fine. So now we have our end, and we're just going to pull the needle. And if you're going to use the felt stem, you're just going to pull it all the way closed so you can't see the stuffing if at all possible. But if you want to use a stick or a dowel rod or a cinnamon stick, you're going to put that in the center right now, and we're going to gather around it. And just be careful. It's probably better to pull on the needle than on the thread, because I don't want anyone to end up cutting their hand on this thread. Oh yeah, those safety pins helped a lot. So when you get it tightened up like that, sew a couple stitches. You can hold it and tie this in a knot That would be ideal. And then I'm going to throw a few more stitches in there. You might want to use a thread that matches. I mean, this does match the ghost, but that matches your pumpkin, because if any of them show, most will be covered by the leaf, but if any of them show, it'll kind of match. Okay, whoo, we did it. I'm going to cut that end off. I'm not cutting off the end with the needle yet. I'm going to take these pins out. Like I said, I have done like 5 of these, and this one is the most difficult one, I swear, because I'm trying to film it. But this will help you if you get into struggles. So now I'm just going to do a few more little stitches across and around that cinnamon stick to just really secure this. So now if you need to, you can rearrange just kind of mush the stuffing around so that you get a shape that you like. And you can leave it just like this. Or you can add embroidery floss to your seam lines to really make it tuck and accentuate the sections of the pumpkin. So let's do that. Black embroidery floss, a little more than twice as long as one of the seam lines. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this needle, I'm going to find one of these seam lines, and I'm going to poke this straight through the pumpkin. You want to get it at the seam line, and then you want to figure out how to poke it to be at the seam line down here too. So you might have to just keep poking and pushing down to get the tip of it. Pull that through, and then you're going to take that embroidery floss and you're going to make sure it's running along the seam line, and then you're just going to tie it. And see how when you go to tie it, you can pull it, and you can pull it just a little bit or more, and it's going to affect how much that's going to buckle. Tie that at the bottom. So you're going to do that for all 8. So it does end up being a little bit messy looking at the bottom, but you can just cut out a circle of felt and hot glue that on at the end so that it looks nice and finished. These 2 are both the larger ones, and you'll notice that when you do the thread to accentuate those lines, it does make your pumpkin a little bit shorter and wider. But it's kind of fun to have a combination of those if you're putting them in a group. So now we have our pumpkin sewn together. We have our stem. If we hadn't done that, we would be hand stitching this on there now. So now all we need to do is attach our leaf. You could do 1 or 2, and our vine. To make your leaf, you're just going to take a piece of felt, and I've decided to go with a softer kind of olive green. You can also do a bright green, or I mean, you could do, because I'm doing a Halloween pumpkin, you could do black, you could do purple, you could get fancy, but I don't have those colors. So I'm just going to go with this and have it match my other pumpkins. Because this is a much smaller shape with a little more intricate shape, I'm going to use small fabric scissors and just trim around. And again, nobody's going to know exactly what your pattern looks like. So if it's not cut perfectly, it really doesn't matter. You just want the basic shape, and so that's why I'm not even pinning this. All right, so now we have our leaf. Now the leaf you can do flat, but my intention in making it with this notch is that you're going to put a little bit of glue on the one side, and put that down. And I always strategically place my leaf to cover the most unsightly part of the gathering. Then I'm going to put a little dot on the top, and I'm going to fold that, because that gives your leaf, be careful, hot glue is hot. It gives your leaf a little pinch and a little bit more shape and personality. And then I'm going to put another little spot underneath so that stays on nicely. Okay, now let me show you how I created the vine. I'm going to take a 10-inch piece of twine. You could use yarn, you could use ribbon, whatever you want to use. I just had this thing of twine that I use for other projects. Then I'm going to take some jewelry wire. So you can use any kind of wire. Don't cut wire with your sewing scissors, ever, ever, ever. These are craft scissors, so I'm going to use those. So now what we're going to do is we're going to hot glue the string along the wire. So what I do is I line up the twine and the wire, and then I put a little bit onto the twine and then press the wire on there. And if you can handle touching hot glue, I often press that down so that it kind of goes around the wire. Now I'm just going to move down the twine and do the same thing in a few little spots. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, like, and ring that bell so you don't miss a video. I'm going to keep the glue gun turned on because you might need a little bit more glue once you twist it. So this part is going to wrap around the stem, but then we're also just going to twist it gently to make that cool loop so it looks like a little vine coming off of your pumpkin. And sometimes as you twist it, you're going to find the wire and the string move apart a little bit more than you'd like. So you can always add a little bit more glue. And like this one, the wire was showing on top. So I just pushed the string around so that the wire is going to be on the back. So usually I'm adding at least another dot or two. But I really think that this adds just that extra touch to make your fabric pumpkin really pop. You could do it with pipe cleaners as well, but I really like this natural look. This vine you can put on before or after you put on your leaf. I usually put it on before, but I forgot. Okay, so we're going to just twist that wire around the stem, whatever kind of stem you did. And then you can just adjust your vine to be positioned exactly how you want it. Now I'm also going to put a little dot of glue under where the twine meets the pumpkin, just to keep that nice and secure. Look at that. So cute. So this is a great project for fall, for Halloween. Would be great for teaching people to sew. So if you're teaching girls, maybe a Girl Scout group, and they're getting their sewing badge, this would be a fun one. They can make their own decor. Well, I would love it if you would drop a comment and tell me how you plan on using these.
Grab your Halloween fabric scraps because today I'm going to show you how easy it is to make the perfect size, simple drawstring bag for a regular size candy bar. These would be great for holiday parties, to make for your grandkids, or if you're really generous and have a lot of sewing to do, you can make these for all the little trick-or-treaters that come to your door. You're going to need 2 pieces of fabric. They can be directional or non-directional. If it's directional, just make sure you have them going in the same direction and do your drawstring at the top so you don't have upside down bags when you're done. Then you're going to need 2 pieces of drawstring. I'm just using thin ribbon, 15 inches long each, a safety pin to put the drawstrings in when we're done, pinking shears. These are my favorite, not only for curves, but they're fantastic for making these bags without having to do French seams and keeping everything from fraying. Finally, I'm going to be using my Cricut mini press. It doesn't heat up as much as a regular size iron, and it's really easy to do small pressing projects like we're going to do on the bag. So I will show you that later. So let's get started. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to take your 2 pieces of fabric and place them right sides together. And again, if it's directional fabric, make sure they are going in the same direction and not one upside down and one right side up. I'm going to place these on the grid of my cutting mat so that I can easily measure down 2 inches and make a mark on either side. Now you can clip or pin. I'm just going to put 3 quick clips in here to make sure that this stays lined up when I move it and we start sewing. I'm going to sew from the marks I made 2 inches down one side, across the bottom, and up the other side with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now normally I do a 1/4 inch, but we want a 1/2 inch seam allowance for this so we have enough room to work on the drawstring channel, which I will show you in a minute. Now I'm going to take small scissors and I'm just going to trim at that 2 inch mark from the raw edge just to where I sewed, but don't clip your stitching. So now we have made a little part that is going to be the flap. We're going to press that in a minute. But first, we are going to take the pinking shears and trim close to these stitch lines. This is going to prevent the bag from fraying so that you can use it year after year, or the recipients can use it as a cute little Halloween storage bag, reuse it as a gift bag, etc. These are so fast to whip up with your scraps, you might as well just make a bunch at once. So we have pinking sheared along the stitch lines, and we have these little tabs. Now let me grab my ironing board. Okay, and I have my little mini press. You can use a regular iron, a small iron, something like this, whatever you want. And the first thing we are going to do is we are going to press all 4 of these tabs. We're going to press that 1/4 inch and then another 1/4 inch so that that raw edge is going to be tucked under. And I am going to use my quilter's clapper. This is just a wonderful piece of unfinished wood, really easy to hold. And part of the reason I am using it on this is when you put the wood down after you have pressed, it helps to really crease that. And more importantly, at least in my opinion for this project, is it takes the heat out of the fabric. So then I don't end up burning my fingers as I'm doing these double folds. So we've done that side. Now I'm just going to turn it over and do the same thing for these two tabs. And you could make it simpler by folding and folding and just pressing once. That will make this process even faster. And once you make one of these, they're so simple, you can probably whip up a bag in less than 5 minutes. Okay, so all 4 of those are pressed. Now we are going to take it to the sewing machine and we're just going to stitch all 4 of these, and then we will make our drawstring channel. So when you're sewing these channels, you want to make sure you're not sewing both of them. So you're just going to fold one down and then make sure you're about 1/8 of an inch from that edge to make sure you are actually sewing that closed. And then make sure you stop and double back before you get to this folded down section. You do not want to sew all the way to this next side. Our next step is to press this top section into the drawstring channel. So what we're going to do is we're going to fold down about 1/4 inch and press. And then you're going to fold that down again and have that folded edge just over where this line is. So where your 2-inch mark was and where your pinking shear part starts. So you're going to fold that down so you have about 1/2 inch channel. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Now we're going to take this back to the sewing machine. We're going to sew across here on each side. Just like when we sewed the edges, we want to make sure we're not catching the opposite side of this drawstring. So I'm just going to fold that back and I'm going to sew straight across. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Now we're going to turn this right side out. I'm just going to push the corners out with my fingers. And all that's left is to add the drawstrings. I'm just going to take a safety pin, pin that on one side of the first ribbon, and you can start on either side. You're going to thread it through, pull it out, and then send it back the other direction. When you get that through, you're just going to tie the ribbon into a little knot. And then you're going to do the same thing with the other piece, but this time you're going to start on the side where you just have the loop and not where you have the knot, because you want your strings to be on the opposite sides of this drawstring bag when it's all done. I would love to know who you're going to make these for, how you're going to use them. These could be really cute to give to teachers, bus drivers, daycare, babysitters, neighbors, so many different ways to use these. So now all you need is your candy. Put that in there, pull the drawstring, and it is ready to go.
In today's episode, we are going to make super simple boo bags. I'm going to show you how to make a drawstring bag with 1 string out of 1 piece of fabric and decorate it for Halloween. This one, I used my Cricut machine and heat transfer vinyl. This one, I used a little scrap of batting and then embroidered the word boo and embroidered the little face on the ghost. You could also use a scrap of fusible fleece for this. This one, I decided to just leave plain so I could use it for other activities as well. And then you can grab these free printable tags that explain what this game is if you're not familiar with it. It's great fun in a neighborhood. So if you don't make one that says you've been booed, you're going to add a tag that says you've been booed. You put treats, or it could be candy, it could be activities, it could be stickers, whatever you think the family or a child would want. Then the second tag explains the game. They will put the "we've been booed" by their front door so that other neighbors that are participating know, oh, this house has already gotten their treats. Let's make sure we spread the joy. Then you recommend that they make 2 new sets of treats and tags and then secretly deliver it. And then it does show my website where they can get these tags for free, tarareed.com/boo. So let's make this out of a fat quarter of fabric. So right here, I have a fat quarter of black, which is 18 by 22. And from that, you can make 1 big bag and 2 little ones, or you can make 4 little ones. You can do fun Halloween things like these Peeps ghosts fit in that big bag really well. Junior mints can fit in there. They can also fit in these smaller bags. And again, you can do whatever kind of treat you like. First thing you're going to do is you're going to decide how many bags you want. And then you're going to cut your fabric. Then this one would become the big bag, this size. But let me show you this. If you're using directional fabric, your big bag is going to be wider instead of taller. And this is my October Ghost fabric that I designed for Riley Blake, and I think it's perfect for the activity of booing, if I do say so myself. So you could do one long one and two skinnier ones like this, or you could do four this size. So you can use a printed fabric, you just need to pay attention to the direction of it when deciding what size bag to do. So then if I want to make two of the smaller ones, I'm going to turn this and I'm going to cut it at the 9-inch mark. So one fat quarter, two small bags, one big bag, or I could cut this again, the 9-inch, and then from one fat quarter, I can make 4 different boo bags. Great if I'm giving them to friends, maybe at the office. All right, so let me show you how quick and easy these are to whip up. We're going to start by pressing each of the short ends over about a 1/4 inch and stitching down those sides. Now we're going to make the casing by pressing this down a 1/4 inch and then a 1/2 inch, or about an inch actually. We're going to press this down. All right, so that is pressed. I'm just going to put a clip at either end. Now I'm just going to stitch right along that folded edge. It will encase the raw edge in the channel for the drawstring. For this bag, I used fusible webbing and a little scrap of batting, and then I embroidered the face on the ghost and the word boo. You can also use your cutting machine, and I have this available. It's going to say you've been booed, and I'm going to do a little glitter ghost. You want to make sure you're putting it on the front. So first you're going to fold it in half, and then you'll notice when you use the drawstring, you don't want to have your design all the way up here. You want it down towards the bottom, but then also remember that you're going to have about a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So we want this to be up from the bottom, but not super close to the top. But because I want to just press this once, I trimmed really close to the ghost, and I'm going to put him right in here so that I can press the ghost and the words at the same time. The thing you need to be really careful of is to make sure that the plastic liner from the ghost is not over top of your vinyl on your words, because if this O was under there, it would press to this backer vinyl and not to your fabric. So that's the main thing to be careful of when you layer. So now we're going to put them here. You also need to remember that you're going to have about a 1/4 inch seam allowance here too. So you want to have it scooched up, but not too close to the top, and closer to the fold than your stitched edges. I'm just going to put that there. And I'm using my Cricut Heat Press Mini. You could use the big one too. This is just easier to grab and go for me. And I have it set to medium. So 2 green lights. I always pull off pretty slowly just to make sure everything is going to be nice and stuck. Oh my gosh, I love that glitter ghost. He would be cute and white too, but I think it just adds a little bit extra. So that is a really, really fast way to add text and a design to your boo bag or any other kind of bag. So now we're just going to finish sewing that up. Start just below where you stitched for the casing, because we need to have these 2 holes open to add our drawstring. And this time we're going to do it with a 1/4 inch seam. You want to make sure that the seams that you did on each of the ends are to the right of your needle so that they won't show on the outside of your bag. Now we have the smaller bag that we did the vinyl, and we have the bigger bag that is plain. So the next step is to take our pinking shears, and this is optional, but you'll see it does fray a little bit on the end if you don't do this. So I just always use my pinking shears and go kind of close to the stitching, but make sure you do not clip that stitching or you'll have a hole in the bottom of your bag. I'm just going to cut along both of those. Then we're going to turn them right side out. Just push out those corners with my finger. And then this one is just the plain bag, but it's bigger. Kind of a family size boo bag, but then you'll be able to use it for other things as well, since we didn't put Halloween on there. Now the last step, well, almost the last step, is to add our ribbon. So for these smaller ones, because I want to make sure I have enough ribbon to just hang this on a doorknob, because you want to sneak and give these to people, I do 4 times the width of the bag. And then just a little bit more for tying it. On the bigger one, I'm just going to do 3 times the size of the bag. because when you pull it, that will be plenty. So you're just going to put one end of your ribbon or string or whatever you're using for your drawstring, one end on a safety pin, and then you're just going to push that through the channel until it comes out the other side. Sometimes it'll get hung up in the fold, so you just have to pull the head of the safety pin back and start again. Then you can take the safety pin off, even that out, and tie your two ends together. So now that boo bag is done, these are super, super easy drawstring bags to make. Again, you're making them out of one piece of fabric, creating your channel first, and it's a one drawstring. In today's episode, we're going to sew up a frighteningly cute table topper for Halloween. This features 3 of the 6 designs from my placemat panel for Riley Blake Designs. I'll also show you how to make this economy block, how to quilt it, bind it, everything you need to know. So let's get started. This table runner is made with 3 images and 2 quilt blocks. This is called an economy block. And even if you have never made a quilt block before, I'm going to show you how to be successful with this one. So this is an economy block. It's basically a square, kind of an offset square, but that's made out of triangles in a big square, also made with triangles. So let's talk about what we need for this. 1 6-inch block for the center. Then you're going to cut 2 6-inch blocks, I'm using black, for these 4 triangles. And then 2 7-inch blocks for your outer triangles. And this is where I recommend you either fussy cut, which means you cut it to fit a specific image from a fabric right in the center, or you use a directional fabric. See how these are directional? I recommend you use a solid or a non-directional print for these pieces. You can use directional, it's a little more complicated. So if you're new to quilting and quilt blocks, just go with basic. We don't have to think as much. So that's what we're going to do here. This, we're obviously not going to cut because that's the square in the center. But these, as long as you layer them perfectly, you can cut them at the same time. And we are going to cut them on the diagonal. So just line your ruler up to the points. And I'm using a 12.5-inch Lori Holt Cute Cut ruler for this. I like to have a lot of different size rulers around, so that, I don't have this big, huge ruler when I'm cutting smaller things. Just makes it a little bit more manageable. So now we have these 4. And then we're going to do the same with the black. So those are the inner triangles, outer triangles, and the square. Now we're going to line up the first 2 of the inner triangles. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the center square and we are going to fold it in half. And I'm just going to finger press so that I can see a crease, but it's not making one so stiff like you would make with an iron. Then I'm going to take this triangle, which is obviously big. It's much bigger than the square. We're going to make these triangles oversized and then cut them to size. So this is also really good if you are new to quilting, because if you're a little bit off on your seams or your pressing, we're going to be cutting to size, so it's not going to mess up your block. So now what I'm doing is I am lining up the point with that crease. And that makes sure that I get this triangle centered on this square. And then you want to make sure this edge is lined up perfectly. Then you can decide how you want to put these together. You can either clip or pin. Sometimes I do both. It depends whichever you feel is going to hold your fabrics together better. I've honestly started using pins more on quilt blocks because quilt blocks are where you really, really, really need to be precise so that everything turns out and your corners are perfectly lined up and crisp. Now we're going to turn this over. We're going to grab our second triangle and I'm going to pull this one back so that I can see that fold. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to line up this edge and I'm going to get that point in that fold. Okay, so that is lined up and we're off to the sewing machine. Now we're going to sew down each side with a 1/4-inch seam, and it is really important that you keep it straight. Here are a few tips for success. Sometimes, and I'm using a 1/4-inch foot, so I'm just going to run it right along the edge. On my machine, I could just press the pedal, it's going to put the foot down, put the needle down, start sewing. But sometimes just that motion moves things ever so slightly. So no matter what kind of machine you have, I recommend you hold your piece of thread so it doesn't get sucked down when it gets knotted, and put your foot down to make sure that you're lined up perfectly at that 1/4 inch mark. Then I'm also going to put my needle down before I press the foot, because I don't want all these feet moving before I know that I'm lined up really well. Then I'm just going to go pretty slowly just to make sure everything stays lined up. Now I'm going to repeat that on the other side. Turn my mat back over so you can see better. So the next thing we're going to do, because these are oversized for what we need for this block, is we're going to turn it this way and we're going to trim the ends of the triangles flush with that square. Then I'm using my Bitty Buddy from Gypsy Quilter. It's just a little trash can that's right on your desk. It's so much better than when I used to throw it at the trash can off my workspace and regularly had pieces of fabric all over the floor because it wouldn't fly well, or because I'm a bad shot, or both. So I do love just keeping this on my workspace, and then when it gets full, I take it over the trash and every piece makes it in. So now we have this step. We're going to do the same thing we did. We're going to fold this in half, making sure that you match the seam on the square so that we're really, really getting that square folded in half. I'm going to finger press, and then we are going to take these triangles and we're going to line the point up with that crease, get the outside edge flush with the edge that we just cut, and pin that together. When you're working on a quilt block, when in doubt, use more pins is my theory, because it's really going to help keep your fabric nice and straight, because any jiggles can really throw off the layout of your block. And if you get a couple jiggles in each seam, you're going to have a less crisp and lined up quilt block than you might want. All right, I'm going to take that back to the sewing machine, do the same thing, and press those seams out. So you'll notice that these black triangles in our finished block seem much smaller than the triangles in the block in progress. And that is for good reason, because these blocks are too big. So this is part of what I talked about, that it's going to be oversized, and we're going to trim it to size so that we get nice, perfect corners and everything like that. So now we need to trim this. So what you're going to do is you're going to turn it on an angle. You're going to find your 1/4 inch mark on the side of your ruler and line that up with that point. When that is lined up, you're going to then make sure that your little lines, whatever kind of lines you have on your ruler, are lined up with these 2 points. And that's going to be what makes sure you have this lined up properly. Because if you just try and do a 1/4 inch based on one point, you could be at a 1/4 inch and have your ruler like this. So to make sure it's straight, you're going to use these 2 points as your guides. And take your time with this, because this is the key to success. So this is not a place to go, oh heck, I just want it done, and wing it. Take your time. And we're going to do this on all 4 sides. Now it looks a lot more like what we're going for. Now we're going to get these white pieces of fabric sewn on. I'm going to show you a little tip that you can do to make your fabric feel a little stiffer and make sure that it doesn't move on its own when you're sewing it together. So what you're going to do is you're going to take spray starch, or I'm using this Faultless Firm Finish, which is ironing spray, basically the same thing. So just follow the directions. You're going to spray a little bit onto your fabric. We'll just put a piece of Ghosts down here to catch any overspray. So you're going to spray these triangles with that starch, and then you're going to iron them to make the spray dry and give the fabric that body that it needs to hold its shape a little bit better when we add these to the quilt block. So now we're going to fold this in half again, but we're going to fold it on the points. And that gives us our guide for pinning on our outer triangles. So we're lining up this point and this edge. And then we're going to turn, fold that back so we can see the crease, and do the same thing with the opposite side, just like we did with those black triangles. All right, now just like with the black ones, we're going to sew those on, press them out. We sewed, pressed these, and added the last set of triangles, so we are almost done our block. Now we're just going to sew these on with the 1/4 inch seam. Now we're just going to press these out, and then we're going to take it back and trim it down to size, and our block will be done. So just for comparison again, here's our finished block, which is cut to 11.5 inches, and here's the one we were just completing. Has a little bit more than a 1/4 inch over here, so we are going to trim that the same way we trimmed the black ones. But see how nicely those points are lined up right on the edge. Ah, it's going to be so cute. For trimming this side, we don't have to turn the center on a diagonal because we're going to be going off of the black this time. So you're going to line up your 1/4 inch mark right at that black point right here. And then you're going to make sure that your line is hitting this point and this point. And again, take your time on this because this is what makes or breaks where your points go when you sew this totally together. And you can tell this wasn't perfectly straight. So this is why when I can, I really like doing oversized blocks and trimming them so that they don't end up distorting everything in a project. All right, let's check that measurement. Perfection, 11.5 inches. So now we have our 2 economy blocks and our 3 placemat panels. We're going to put the Happy Halloween in the center. And you'll notice the brown around this, how I cut it, isn't perfect, but that's okay. As long as the brown is less than a 1/4 inch, it's not going to show on your finished project. So I'm just going to line these two up. Oh my gosh, this is going to seem so easy peasy. After doing all those quilt blocks, we're just going to line up this edge and pin that. On this point, I'm going to put this pin way in here so that I can leave that pin together even when I sew, because we want to make sure we get over that spot and right at that intersection of stitches, which you can't really see because it's black on black, so that that point looks really, really good when we get that sewn together. All right, I have all these pieces together. It is 72 inches long, so obviously much bigger than will fit on my camera. I'll just show you that. Now we're going to cut the border pieces for our topper. And because I'm using directional fabric, we have to be careful about which direction we cut it, because I want my ghosts facing up all the way around, not sideways on the sides. You're going to need 3/4 of a yard of this fabric to create this project, and that includes for those center squares. So we're going to put our small ruler away because obviously it's too small. We're going to get out our big one, and we are going to cut 4 pieces, 2.5 inches wide, going this direction, and that will be the top and the bottom of our table runner. So it's going to be 2 pieces to go on each side. I'm just going to cut 4. And make sure when you're using your rotary cutter and your ruler, you want to have your hand flat. My friend warned me about this years ago, and I didn't listen, and I kept doing this to feeling like I was pressing down more, and I ended up with a messed up thumb tendon that took 9 months to heal. So make sure you're keeping your hand flat. Kind of put your pinky over here to help your ruler from sliding if you can as you cut, and your thumb will thank you. So I have 4 in that direction, and we're going to piece these together just like we would do binding. But first we need to get those strips for the side. For that, we need a 12-inch piece, which is the rest, most of the rest of your 3/4 yards. And you'll have fabric left to do other projects with this as well. I'm going to cut off the ends so we're not working with the selvage. And for this, we just need 2 strips that are 2.5 inches wide. And because this is folded over, I just need to make 1 cut and I'll be good to go. And I cut these to 12 inches, even though this is 11.5, because I like to do it a little bit bigger and then trim it after it's sewn on, just to make sure it's going to be straight at the ends. And I'm going to pin this on both of the short ends of the table runner. So when you do Halloween decor, do you like cute Halloween or scary Halloween? I'm assuming you might like cute Halloween if you're still with me on this project, because this fabric is definitely cute, or even maybe rustic Halloween, not spooky. What other kinds of things do you sew for Halloween? Do you sew kids' costumes? Do you make more home decor? Love to know. Drop me a comment and let me know what you love to make for Halloween. Now we're going to sew these 2 ends onto our long strip that we just made with a 1/4 inch seam. Put one of your fabrics face up, straight up if it's directional. When you're putting this together, you always put right sides together and at a 90-degree angle. Now, if you're using directional fabric, never ever sew until you test it. So you can put a pin at an angle where you would sew. So that's going to be the stitch line. And then pull that down and make sure, voila, yay, we did it right. Make sure everything's straight up, because every once in a while you'll put this upside down and you'll have half the things right side up, half the things right side down. Then you're going to be using your seam ripper again. But this worked. So I'm going to connect these two together, and then I'm going to do the other set of 2 as well. If you feel like you're going to sew straight, you can eyeball going from here to here, or you can mark it to be safe, which I definitely recommend, especially if you're a newer sewer. See, here I am with even more sizes, cute cut rulers. I just got a whole set of the rectangles. I use them all. Now I'm just going to line that up, and then I'm going to take a chalk pen from Clover. I'm just going to draw a line on there. So now I have a guideline to follow when I sew that diagonal. I'm just going to check that, make sure it's good. Yep, still good. So now you can either take it back to your mat and use your rotary cutter to cut 1/4 inch from the seam, or you can just use scissors. Then I'm going to press that seam open, and I'm going to have the band that we'll use on the top and the bottom of the table runner. So we put the ends on, and I press those seams. So now I'm just going to cut the edges off so that they are even with the side of the placemat. Now our ends are lined up. Now comes the task of pinning the strips across the top and the bottom. Now make sure the selvage is off of the end so that you don't end up having, Riley Blake as part of your table runner. Put everything face up to make sure you have the directionality proper. So everything is facing up, so that is good to go. Now you can either fold down and pin, or I prefer to have my table runner side so I know that I'm hitting that corner properly on top of this little sandwich. So I'm going to do it like this. But I'm also still making sure that I'm having the same edges together. So I can just do this to double check. Okay, directions are good. And I like to make sure I put a pin at every seam line to make sure that all stays straight. So those 2 strips together gave us almost exactly what we needed. It has about 3.5 inches on this side. And what did we leave on this side? Not much, just a little bit over the selvage. So now I'm going to take this to the sewing machine. I'm going to sew that side on with a 1/4 inch seam, and then I'm going to press it out, and we're going to pin on the bottom. Now that we have the borders sewn on and trimmed so they're nice and square on each end, it is time to sandwich this together with the back and the batting so that we can quilt this before we add the seam binding. So to do that, you need 1 yard of whatever fabric you're going to use for your backing, and cut it into 2 18-inch pieces, which I already did because it's pretty simple. So cut it into 2 18-inch pieces and sew that together, press your seams open. So I'm going to use the purple version of the October Ghosts on the back. And we're going to put this on our workspace, wrong side up. Because we're going to be quilting this together, we're not doing any right sides together, or else we're going to have wrong sides out. So wrong side up. Then we're going to take our strip of batting, which is about 18 inches wide and longer than 82 inches. You always want your backing and your batting, it's not perfectly straight, but we trim it later. You always want your backing and your batting to be longer and wider by at least like 1 inch than the top of your quilt or table runner or whatever you're going to be quilting. So this is the center. So I'm going to lay that, and before I get it really laid out well, I'm going to just double check that all the ghosts are pointing in the same direction. So you'll see the backing is a bit bigger, and the batting's even bigger than the backing, but that's fine. You just want everything a little bit bigger than this. Now I'm going to grab quilting safety pins. What makes it a quilting safety pin, you ask? The size. It's big. So this is a traditional safety pin, and this is a quilting safety pin. And you want it big because you want to be able to go through all the layers and really hold a bit together. So that's going through all the 2 fabrics and the batting. And this is what we're going to be using just to hold this sandwich together, basically, while we go around and quilt it. There's not a ton of rhyme or reason, just you want to make sure it's pretty secure because this is a really long piece. So it's going to be moving around a bit as you take it to the sewing machine and as you're working on the quilting. So you want to make sure it all stays lined up. Also, when you're putting these pins in, make sure you have your material over a rotary mat and not on top of wood. Sometimes you're poking down and you don't want to be scratching your workstation or your dining room table or wherever you happen to be working. So just be aware of what is under the section that you're using when you're inserting these pins. Now, because this is pretty long off the end, I am going to cut that off, just so that there's a little bit less that I have to manage, and that's going to get a lot of lint on you when you sew. So it's just better not to have a ton of batting hanging off the end. Before we head to the sewing machine, let's talk about thread. I often just sew with black or white when I'm piecing things together, but when you get to the quilting stage of a project, you might want to choose a color. Whatever you use for your bobbin thread is what is going to show on the back of your project. So I grabbed all the purples that I have, and I feel like Goldilocks. None are quite right. That's a little dark. These are too lilac. Gosh, that's so dark it almost looks black. That one's no. I could do white because there's a lot of ghosts, or I could do this. I guess I could do black, but I'm not in love with black. It's a little too dark. I'd rather do this. It'll blend a little bit better. What to do? What would you do? Would you do white or would you do purple? Then on the top, I can also decide, do I want to do a matching, do I want to use white? Do I want to use black? Do I want to use orange? I can also do a combination of colors. Maybe I'll do black here, do orange here, do some white. We shall see what we decide when we are at the sewing machine. Did you know that you can get pre-wound bobbin thread, and it always has way more thread on it that lasts a lot longer than if I do it myself. So I always buy packs of black or white, and there will be a link below this video for you to find them. So I'm going to put a new white one in, because when you're getting into quilting, especially if you're going to be doing some free motion quilting, which I am, you use a bit of thread. And I have changed my needle. I actually have a stitch in the ditch needle on, which I don't need for the basting step, but I can use it because it's just going to save me one less time to change that needle. If you have any walking feet are really good for quilting, because basically a walking foot, you have the feet on the bottom of your sewing machine that always move. Every sewing machine has that. But if you have a machine where you can get a walking foot, it also has little feet that move the top. So you have them working in unison, moving the top and bottom, so you get less pinching. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to do a straight stitch, and you're going to set it for as long as you possibly can on your sewing machine. That's a 5 stitch on mine. And we're going to stitch really, really close to the edge. We're just basting this together so that it doesn't shift when we're doing the more intricate quilting. And so we want it about 1/8 of an inch from the edge, because we don't want this basting to show when we add the binding later. If you're newer to quilting and you're not familiar with the term stitch in the ditch, let's talk about what that means. It basically means to stitch right in where that seam is, so where the two fabrics meet, so that you're kind of hiding your quilting stitches and they're not really showing. I am using a stitch in the ditch foot on my Janome machine. So basically you can see it has this little metal part that comes down, and you use that as a guide. So as I'm sewing, I'm going to keep that right in that ditch, and then my needle should follow. So let's stitch in the ditch all the way around the border, and then I'm going to do some stitch in the ditch sewing on the economy blocks as well. Now that we're going to be moving the quilt around more, it is time to break out quilting gloves. And they basically have little dots of silicone that helps you grip the fabric and move it more. It's easier on your hands because you don't have to hold as tightly to get things moving. And it also makes your quilting go better. I love these. They're purple from Gypsy Quilter. There's lots of other brands as well. And then one of my friends actually got gardening gloves and then cut the tip off of it so that she was still able to use her phone without having to take her glove off, because that is one issue you can have. So I'm going to wear these when I do the rest of this quilting. And as you quilt by machine, you just want to make sure you're keeping things as flat and smooth as possible as you're moving it through your sewing machine so that your fabrics don't bunch up and cause buckles. Now that I stitched in the ditch all the way around the border, I'm going to be doing it on the economy block. Now, one thing that's tricky about machine quilting is what to do with all the quilt as you're moving it around under the machine. The main thing is you need to keep it rolled up or together so that the part you're working on stays flat, so you don't have any bunching on the back. You can buy little clips that will help with that, but I usually manage to get it work just by rolling it. So let's stitch in the ditch around the block. Now, because I've already done this section, I don't want to go over it again for fear it's going to make it look bad, and you'll definitely see more of those stitches if I were to double stitch on the back. So I'm just going to be doing the short sections that need to be done and just keep moving my machine. I'll give you more of a bird's eye view of how to deal with the fabric that's around the area that you're stitching. See how we got a couple stitches on the black. I don't like them. So I didn't knot this, I just cut the thread, and I'm just going to use my seam ripper and pull them out to here, because that's where I went awry. Okay, so I got them out of the top. Then I am going to turn this over and find that thread, and I'm going to trim that before I start stitching again so that I don't end up with a bulky little thread down there. And then I'm going to start a little bit back so that I'm going over the stitches that I already did to make sure that they're not going to fall out. And there we go. We stitched down this side, we stitched around the black, and then I'm going to do the same on the other economy block. Now I took off my stitch in the ditch foot and we're back to a regular foot, but still a walking foot. I'm using the edge of this metal, like where the metal meets the plastic, as my guide, and I'm going to go around this square. So now I just need to do the other one. I now have my free motion foot on my machine, and I'm going to do just some fun stitching around the pumpkins, the banners up here. You definitely need your gloves if you're going to be doing free motion because you need to have pretty good grip on your fabric to get it to move and stay flat. Detailed you could go around all of the edges for a little bit different look. So I had fun with that, tried not to be too much of a perfectionist, just threw those stitch lines in there, accentuated their mouths, their cute little faces, went up along the banner line up here. On this one, I did a little bit more detail. I stitched along each of the letters and then also did some accent on the little pumpkin. I have this all quilted together, looking cute. It is time to trim the edges. So you're just going to take your rotary cutter and your ruler, and you're going to get this all squared off. And I like to square based on the inside. So if you need to cut a little bit of that border, that's okay. You're going to do all four sides. Now the edges are all cut and trimmed, and we are ready to do the binding. And I have made 6 strips width of fabric in black, put them together just like we stitched together these top borders, and then pressed the entire strip in half. So now let's head back to the sewing machine and get this binding on. We are almost done. We're back at the machine. I have my 1/4 inch walking foot back on, and we are going to attach the binding. So I always like to start the binding on the bottom of a project instead of the top. Then I'm going to do the raw edges of the binding to the raw edges of the table topper, And then I'm going to leave about 10 to 12 inches empty so that we have that space to match our binding once we go all the way around our table topper. Now let me show you the secret to a well-mitered corner. As you get to the end, you're going to stop when your needle is a 1/4 inch from this end. So I'm going to kind of be looking in this way to watch and make sure I stop my needle 1/4 inch from that edge. Then I'm going to leave the needle in, raise the foot, turn this 45 degrees, and I'm just going to sew straight off of that corner. Oh, it's a lot of material. Okay, I'm going to grab my project. I'm going to turn it sideways, and I'm going to make sure this part is laying flat. Now I'm going to fold the binding up. So we have a nice corner. This edge is at a 90-degree angle to this, parallel to this edge. And then we're just going to fold it down over top of itself so that it's nice and squared. See? And then we're just going to start again and do this next edge. And you're going to do that on all 4 corners. Now we've gone all the way around and we have left some space, lots and lots of space, open on the bottom. So let me show you how to get your binding to match perfectly every time. I'm going to go about 6 inches and I'm going to cut across. Every time I cut binding, this makes me nervous, but I promise you it works. So you need to cut a piece that when you lay it across your binding is going to be wider. And I'm going to open that up. So we're going to lay that down flat. And then we are going to put this piece on top, lining up this raw edge with that raw edge. Now we're going to place the other side lined up along the edges, just like you would have sewn it, and lay it down flat over top of this piece. And now what we're going to do is we're going to trim this top one to this bottom edge. So I'm going to lift these two and I'm going to trim that. So now you'll see these two are overlapping the exact distance of the width of your binding. And now I'm going to fold the table topper and I'm just going to clip it. And that's just going to make it easier for us to get these two pieces together without straining from the distance. Now you're going to take your bottom one and you're going to open it up and place it down. See how it's folded this way? That fold is going to be up. So if you were to let it fold, it's going to pop up like a tent. Then you're going to take the other one and you're going to do it the opposite way. You're going to open it up so that the wrong side, the inside folded, is open. And then you're going to place these together and you're going to line that bottom edge up with the side of the bottom one and the side of this with the cut edge of this. Then we're going to twist. And I'm going to grab my ruler. This is exactly what we did when we made the pieces that went across the top and the bottom, and we had to piece together our fabric. I'm going to get my ruler and my chalk line. And if you want to, you can pin it if it keeps twisting. Sometimes it twists like that for me, sometimes it doesn't. And then we're just going to sew straight down that line. Before you cut that off, you want to double check and make sure you got it right. You want to make sure that when it folds, it's not twisted, it's nice and flat. The distance is perfect. Yes, okay, we did a good job. So now I'm going to open that back up. I'm going to cut that 1/4 inch from the stitch line. Then I'm going to take it to my ironing board. I'm going to press that seam open and then press that down and then just finish that stitch to have the binding stitched all the way around this table topper. Now we have all the binding sewn on, so now we just need to press it, and then I'm going to be machine stitching mine on, which you can do, or if you want to be more traditional, you can hand stitch. So we're going to keep it face up, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to press the binding away from the table topper. And when you do it up in the corner, don't press the actual corner, just kind of press about 1 inch towards it. Press about 1 inch away from that. And we will be getting the corner situated and mitered beautifully when we turn this back over. Once you've gone all the way around, you're going to flip it over and then fold the corners up. We're going to make both of the long ends have this perfect triangle before we iron the short end over. So you want to get that nice and creased. I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. Make sure everything's flat. I'm going to get a nice triangle there. And now we're going to make sure that triangle is folded. We're going to fold that down, and that should match beautifully. So now we're just going to press that as well. Do that all the way around. Okay, so that's all ironed. Now there's a few ways to prepare to finish this. If you want to be a real traditionalist and you don't want any stitching showing on the front, and then you would hand stitch all the way around. That's too much work for me for a project like this, too hard on my wrist. So I am a fan of machine stitching. You can pin or clip this and then sew along. But what I have found when I do that is sometimes it gathers and it doesn't stay exactly where it needs to be. Two ways to fix that. One would be to use a product like Easy Steam. Use a product like this, the Easy Steam. It's basically a tape. It's sticky on both sides. You put that under there, press over it, and that's going to stick. That would work great. I love this stuff for smaller projects. It gets a little expensive to me to do for something like this. The next option, Elmer's School Glue. Very economical, really easy to use. So there are two ways to use your glue. If you're ready to take a break, then you're going to run a little bit of glue and you're going to clip it and you're going to say, oh my gosh, I can't do anything else because my glue needs to dry. Then you're going to come back a little bit later, take your clips off, and the glue is going to be dry. The fabrics are going to be nice and adhered, and you're going to be good to go to sew. But if you're in a hurry and you just want to be done and you don't want to wait for glue to dry, there is another option. So I'm just going to run a thin bead underneath where that binding is going to overlap. And I'm going to turn and I'm going to press it down, and I do it in sections. Turn the steam off on my iron so I'm not adding any moisture. And then I'm just going to quickly press, and the heat is going to dry the glue, and that's going to stay stuck very nicely. So we are going to do that all the way around. Put a few clips every so often, even though I have glued this and dried the glue with the iron, just to make sure it doesn't slip when I am moving it around, because I'm going to be sewing with this on top. So this will be on the bottom. And then I also always clip on the corners. Oh, I forgot to put my little tag in there when I was pressing this. This happens a lot. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take my tag. I usually put it on the bottom towards one end. I'm going to pull this up, releasing that glue. And then I'm just going to press that down, and then I'll just add another clip so I know where that is. Now we're going to be turning our project over, and I'm using my 1/4 inch foot again, and I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch from the binding. So I'm just going to sew a little bit, and then I'm just going to double check and make sure that we're catching all of the back binding fabric before going all the way around the quilt. Okay, so I've sewn a few inches. Now I'm just going to take a peek and make sure it is catching, and it is. So it's catching or the back of the binding fabric. So now I'm going to go all the way around the table topper.
Hi, it's artist Tara Reed here, and I want to show you how quick and easy it is to make a fabric pumpkin to add to your fall decor, your Thanksgiving table, or just anything fall. And I'm using my Fall Barn Quilts fabric. This is the maple leaf print, which comes in 5 different colors, so you can do a variety of pumpkins. All you need is a fat 1/4 of fabric, a stick or a cinnamon stick, a piece of ribbon, I started with a 10-inch piece, or some twine, and that's it. No sewing. It's a great project to do with kids. So let me show you how easy it is to do, and then you can get started on your own. Let me show you how quick and easy it is to make a pumpkin decoration for fall with toilet paper, a stick or a cinnamon stick, and a fat 1/4 of fabric, and just a little scrap of twine or ribbon. I just grabbed what I had around, and this is about 10 inches long, and then some scissors. So you can use a fat 1/4 or get a 1/4 inch of fabric and cut it in half, which is what I did here. And then you're going to put it wrong side up. You're going to put your toilet paper in the middle, and you're going to unroll a little bit.
Now the size of your pumpkin is going to depend on the quality of your toilet paper. I bought this at a dollar store because I didn't want my more expensive toilet paper just hanging out in a fabric pumpkin all fall. So I went for inexpensive, and you're just going to unroll it a little bit and crunch it up. That helps it do the round shape a little bit better. Then I like to start with one of the shorter ends. You're going to just put that inside the toilet paper roll, and you're just going to work your way around. You want to make sure the cut edges go in, and then just kind of pull. Let me move that so you can see better. You're just going to kind of pull it up and tuck it so that it's going to give you a fun puffed out shape like a pumpkin, because you don't want everyone to be like, oh, what a beautiful toilet paper roll you have in fabric with a stick in it. You want them to think you're extra, extra clever when it takes you like 2 minutes, if that, to do. All right, so you can adjust it, how it's, pulling or not pulling. And then all you do is you either take a stick, I got that from my yard, put that in the center, or you can do a cinnamon stick if you don't have sticks in your yard or you want something a little more fragrant. I'm gonna go with stick. And then I'm taking this 10-inch piece of ribbon and tying it around the stick. Well, I guess I could have done that before I put it in, be easier. All right, tie that around the stick, put that in. I want them both going off the same edge, and then they're a little bit long, so I'm just going to fold it in half and give them kind of a fun, uneven apparently, pointed edge. I'll do that one a little bit better. And look at that. I have a pumpkin. What did that take me? Like a minute or two? And mostly because I was talking.